The film begins with a 1973 Oldsmobile traveling deep into the Tennessee hills. Linda's the love of her longtime boyfriend Ashley's life and is joining him for the weekend at a cabin in the woods. Neither of them own the place and are trespassing, with the built-in excuse should the owners come home that they simply got lost. Ash gifts Linda a magnifying glass pendant in a romantic gesture and goes into another room to get them both a drink. While Linda changes, Ash comes across an old tape player and regretfully listens to the last thing ever recorded on it. Recently Professor Raymond journeyed with his family to Castle Candor, where they rediscovered an artifact called the Necronomicon Ex Mortis alongside a Kandarian dagger. Roughly translated into the Book of the Dead, the 3,000-year-old pages are inked in blood, and give dark spirits the license to possess the living when spoken aloud, but was missing since the year 1300 AD until Raymond brought it here for translating. The recording begins to recite one of the translated passages awakening a Kandarian demon, which charges straight at the cabin and into Linda's window. Returning to discover Linda missing and the bedroom destroyed, Ash ventures outside and begins to search through the woods for his beloved. Suddenly Linda springs up a deadite possessed by the demon and begins creeping towards Ash, but with a single swing of a nearby shovel he takes her head clean off and quickly buries the evidence in a shallow grave. Just then the evil returns in first person and breaks through all the cabin doors, before picking up the hero and spinning him through the woods and running him into a tree. After nearly drowning, Ash wakes a completely deformed deadite himself, but the sun begins rising at the same time, causing the evil spirit to be driven from his body and he passes out. The surrounding mist retreats back into the woods and Ash is left there for hours before eventually waking up. The woods now seem peaceful, until he sees a face superimposed on the cabin asking him to join the dark side, so he gets in the delta and dips. When he reaches the bridge to freedom it's now completely destroyed and folded back. After a dramatic shout, the sun rapidly sets behind him and the Kandarian demon returns from the earth. Ash speeds back to the cabin until hitting a tree stump and being flung out of the windscreen and landing on his face. He runs the rest of the way back to the cabin, but the demon follows him inside and begins breaking down doors in its pursuit, but Ash manages to give it the slip. Feeling embarrassed, the evil presence gives up and retreats back into the woods, as Ash is shown to have hidden away in the cellar. At a nearby airport, Annie has procured more pages of the book and has returned to have them translated by her father. Her boyfriend Ed meets her, but he says he hasn't spoken to her parents for weeks and the cabin has no phone. Meanwhile Ashley sits alone in the cabin, unable to escape and being haunted by the possessed piano reminding him of Linda. The barricade suddenly knocked off the window, so the hero takes a look outside towards Linda's grave, seeing her decomposed corpse reanimate and collecting its head. The evil stop-motion dances around in its skin suit and even straddles the limb of a tree, then leaps away into the shadowy forest. She reappears right in front of Ash and begins slamming his head into the window, when suddenly he wakes up in the armchair assuming he dreamt the last few minutes, but Linda's head drops into his lap and bites into his hand. Unable to remove the possessed head's lockjaw, he runs out back to the work shed and clamps it in a vise when it begins to tell him how his girlfriend is being tormented in hell. He reaches for the shelf-marked chainsaw, but the headless torso already has it and attacks him, but he deflects it with a crowbar back into itself. Not able to see what it's doing, the torso begins flailing around until eventually Ash brings it down. Taking the chainsaw he turns to Linda, who's now herself, and begging not to be hurt. When he begins to break down she spews black bile and turns back evil to mock him, so he saws her head in half, spraying blood on the light bulb sending the room bright red. He stumbles back to the cabin and swaps out the chainsaw for a double-barrel shotgun and begins to load it as a chair starts to rock, but when he brings his hand near it, it instantly stops. He drops the gun and staggers over to the mirror to tell himself that he's fine, when his reflection reaches out saying that he just killed his girlfriend. Does that sound fine to you? It starts to choke him when the camera zooms out and Ash is suddenly alone and doing the choking himself. The mirror's now just an ordinary mirror once again, but the bite wound from Linda suddenly begins to spread and mutate his hand, giving it a mind of its own. Ash starts to scream for his hand back as the fog is shown returning. He tries to drown it, but his evil hand begins to fight back, smashing plates over his head. After beating him nearly to death, it flips him onto the floor and knocks him unconscious with a few more dishes. It attempts to use a cleaver to finish off its host, when Ash wakes up and stabs his own hand, pinning it to the floor. He grabs the nearby chainsaw and starts it with his teeth, and with a wild grin on his face removes the possessed limb, drenching his face in blood. Meanwhile Annie and Ed are just getting to the cabin but are met by Jake, who shows them that the bridge is destroyed. The stranger's equally trashy, always spitting girlfriend asks what they want up there, but Annie refuses to tell Bobby Joe the details. Jake says for $100 he'll show them another way around, which Annie counters by saying he must also carry her luggage, so he agrees, not realizing he just made a deal to carry a monolith on his back. Meanwhile inside the cabin, the hand is now its own creature, making noises and laughing at Ash as he catches it in a tin, but as he tapes up his stump it escapes and makes a prison break for the walls. Ash begins firing shells wildly into the wall in hopes of hitting it, when the hand gets caught in a rat trap before flipping him off and scurrying away. After a few more wild shots, it fires back itself with a flood of red covering Ash and the entire room in blood. It all turns black and disappears back into the wall, leaving Ash to stumble back onto a chair that collapses, adding insult to injury. On top of that, a possessed deerhead begins laughing at him and the whole room comes alive in hysterics. Ashley joins, having completely lost his sanity, when he reacts to a noise at the front door by firing at it. After checking to see the coast clear, Jack suddenly tackles Ash to the ground, and while Ed helps hold him down, knocks the hero into a daze. BJ was just winged by the gunshot, while Annie, seeing the blood-covered chainsaw, assumes that the strangers killed her parents. Jake suggests they lock him in the fruit cellar, where he kicks Ash down the stairs and onto his head. The spitter does her thing on him and they begin to find answers to the missing parents. Ash listens from the cellar as recordings from Annie's father tell of her mother's possession after he first translated the passage. When the professor says that he killed her and buried her body in the fruit cellar, his wife Henrietta rises from the dead, bringing a shriek out of Ash. Realizing now that he didn't kill Annie's parents, Jake saves the stranger from the rapidly mutating demon by dragging him out by the head. Henrietta grabs Jake by his face, then similarly throws Ed by his, knocking him unconscious. The hero slams the hatch closed, stomping on it and sending an eyeball flying into Bobby Joe's needlessly open mouth, and after a swift kick in the face, Jake helps him hold the hatch down and locks it. When Ash begins filling them in on the situation, saying that they must wait until daylight to escape, Mother takes human form and tries to persuade Annie to let her out by singing a childhood song. Ash grabs her arm, shaking his head, and unlike what most characters would do, she instantly and wisely agrees that it's not her mother. Suddenly evil Ed jumps up, having been possessed in the distraction, and levitates, and alongside evil Henrietta he chants that the survivors will all be dead by dawn. He bites a chunk of BJ's hair off and throws Jake into the ceiling, shattering a light bulb. With Annie thinking that Ash is a coward for running away as Ed begins to free Henrietta, he returns brandishing an axe and hacks the deadite to pieces, covering the walls in goo. They all regroup when Jake notices that the trail they came in on has disappeared, when just then the whole forest falls quiet. Suddenly they begin to hear banging around the cabin as something tries to cross its way over. Annie, growing accustomed to Ash, helps him in searching one of the rooms, when the other two join and the spirit of the professor appears to them. He tells his daughter that the new pages she returned with contain the key to dispelling the evil dead. Just then Bobby Joe notices she's holding Ash's possessed hand and knocks over their only light source in terror, and by the time it's relit she's missing and has taken off into the forest. She runs until her legs get tired when the trees come alive and attack her. They wrap her up in their vines and then drag her viciously through the forest, attaching to her face. Then when it runs BJ into a tree, killing her, we transition to Annie and Ash reading the pages, finding inside a drawing of Ash defeating the evil back in 1300 AD, chainsaw and boomstick in hand, but neither of them make the connection. They read on to learn that a portal must be created and evil sent through it, when a shotgun-wielding Jake calls the whole story mumbo jumbo and throws the pages into the cellar. He forces the two into the forest in search of Bobby Joe and begins shouting at the top of his lungs. He knocks both Ash and Annie to the ground when the Kandarian demon returns, but instead of taking Ed, it possesses the unconscious Ash and throws the wailing hillbilly headfirst into a tree. Annie makes it to the cabin and holds back evil Ash as he tries break down the door. When he finally stops and leaves, she takes the ceremonial knife and begins to check the other rooms of the cabin. Something attempts to get in through the back door, so she stabs it to realize she accidentally stabbed a still living Jacob. Evil Ash returns, but Jake's body prevents the door closing, so Annie has to drag him inside. After a few bangs on the door, the demon again disappears, so Annie removes the dagger from Jake and drags him back to the main room, placing him right next to the cellar hatch. Henrietta pops up and pulls Jake inside by his head, soaking Annie in an ungodly amount of blood during their tug-of-war over Jake's surely now corpse. All by her lonesome, evil Ash made it inside and throws Annie into the wall, knocking her unconscious. Before he kills her, he finds the necklace reminding him of Linda and miraculously reverts back to his normal self, when axe-wielding Annie attacks him, assuming he's still possessed. After he convinces her that he won't turn back into a deadite, the two make their plans to retrieve the pages and vanquish the evil together. Ashley J. Williams modifies the chainsaw onto his amputated stump, and with a hook on his chest to pull the cord, he can now go akimbo. With it he saws off the shotgun, puts it in a back-mounted holster and pronounces the whole thing groovy. Groovy. After unnecessarily cutting the cellar doors in half, Ash enters alone and begins to follow a trail of the pages into the darkness. At the very end, Jake's bleached skeleton is thrown from the shadows at him along with the final papers. He throws them up to Annie, who begins to translate them, when Henrietta appears and pulls the hero under the stairs and throws him against a wall. Annie's then attacked by her demon mother, who levitates in all her grotesque glory above her, when Ash emerges from the cellar. The two begin to battle when Henrietta gets angry and transforms again into her more demonic shade of lipstick. Ash begins battling Gooseneck when Annie distracts her mother by singing a lullaby that she would sing as a little girl. When the demon side lashes out, Ash decapitates it with a swing of his sword, then as the head chants that it will swallow his soul, he tells it to swallow this. The two can finally relax, when evil returns once again in the form of trees and begins wailing on the cabin trying to get inside. The demon manifests in front of them in the form of a giant head covered in the smaller heads of its victims, sending the hero's hair white. Annie begins reciting the rest of the translation to open a portal and send it back to hell, but is mortally stabbed in the back by Ash's hand with the Kandarian dagger. While Ash is grabbed by tree branches and brought closer to its mouth, hard to kill, Annie begins reciting the rest of the passage. Ash sticks the chainsaw into the demon's eyeball just as Annie uses her dying breath to speak the final word and collapses, causing a large vortex to open up just outside the cabin and suck the demon in. With Annie no longer alive to close the portal, the door rips open and drags the contents of the cabin inside, including our hero. After going through a transition of Christmas lights, Mr. Williams and his car are spat out into a desert. He looks up to find himself in 1300 AD surrounded by knights about to execute him, when a winged deadite attacks from the skies. The terrified amateurs flee back to their castle while Ashley uses his boomstick to one-shot the creature's head clean off. The knights return and proclaim Ash to be their savior, believing him to be sent from the heavens to destroy the evil spirits they call deadites. Realizing that he's the prophesized hero from the Book of the Dead, he begins to shake his head as the army awaits their new leader's orders. And the movie ends.
Recite the passages. Dispel the evil. Save my soul. And your own life.
Remember to reach out if you're ever in need.